Hey everyone, welcome to another Forza car review. Today we'll be looking at the Porsche 944 Turbo. The 944 started its life as a racing edition of the Porsche 924, but it was later modified and released to the public in 1982. The 1989 model we have here represents the best of the 944 line, sporting a bigger engine, bigger turbo, improved suspension, and a lot of other smaller improvements, giving us what was the fastest four-cylinder car in production at the time. And this is another car I have a personal connection with. My first job ever before I even had a driver's license was essentially working out of a garage, and my boss owned two modified 944s that I had a great view of from my desk. So many hours of my day were spent staring at those Porsches, daydreaming of what it must feel like to drive a car that's that cool. Now, although I never got a chance to drive them, it's time to relive the dream in Forza, so let's take the 944 Turbo out for a test drive. Alright, so as is custom on the car review series, let's give it a second first to hear the engine. And I've got to say, I feel right now that it's a little above average for engine sound. I think there's a subtle crackling in between the shifts, and the revs sound pretty good. But let's move on because I'm definitely noticing here that the handling is very sloppy. The improved suspension didn't really seem to age well over the past 30 odd years, so that will definitely be on the top of my priority list for the mods and tuning. Now, the car does have some great power. I mean, we're not even at the top of B class, and I feel like this car has some real speed to it. I'm feeling an A class tune here if I can get the handling under control, but if I can't, this should still make for a very strong B class car, just considering how much power it makes stock. So I'm going to head back to the garage, and let's see what we're working with. Okay, so starting with tire compounds, it looks like we've got the full array of options here. That's definitely good to see. And I think for the first time in car reviews short history, we finally have wheel spacing options. This makes me so happy. There are so many cars that are ruined a little bit visually by having terrible wheel fitment, so I'm always so happy when I see this option available. Moving on to aero, and I've got a bad feeling, yeah, we're stuck with stock Forza equipment here. I was really hoping for at least one kit to work with, but no worries. Let's see what we've got for engine swaps. And I'm seeing a few solid options here. I actually love these two engines, so it's good to see them available. And as usual, I'm sure with a rear-wheel drive layout, we're going to have the option for an all-wheel drive swap. But in car review fashion, we'll be sticking with the stock layout. So I'm going to get my hands dirty here and come back with a tune for the 944. Alright, so we are back with an A-Class road tune on the 944 Turbo, coming in at 357 horsepower and weighing a modest 2,509 pounds. This was a very fun car to tune because I really wanted to push into A-Class, but I was struggling a lot with rear grip and handling, especially considering, as you can see, I did keep the stock aero. I spent more time than usual with the tuning here, playing a lot with the sway bars, suspension, and damping, but man, was I rewarded when it all came together. This car is locked in, and I love the way it feels. As for looks, of course we couldn't change much, but even with just some lowered suspension and proper wheels, this car looks so hot. So let's take it out for a run around the test track and see how it compares. So just to reconfirm what I was mentioning earlier, this car drives beautifully. Being rear-wheel drive, it's often tough to keep the rear end in check, as I'm sure most of you have experienced, but this car, after spending a lot of time in the tuning window, has the perfect amount of oversteer without compromising grip. As long as you drive smooth and set a good line, this car locks into corners and feels really rewarding to drive. Moving back to looks, I've had a lot of issues in the past with cars looking really good from a side profile or like in the photo mode, but not so much from the rear driving camera, and I was a bit worried about that here, but it's definitely not the case. This car is just gorgeous through and through, and I'm honestly really rooting for the 944 to get a good time. Now, I'm trying to keep these car review episodes a little on the shorter side, so we're going to cut right through the suspense, and let's get right into that lap time. how did the 944 Turbo stack up against its competitors? Alright, so we're looking to compare it against two other cars in the series, the Datsun and the Abarth, as well as the RX-7 that I seeded the leaderboard with at the beginning of this series. So 240 is a pretty good time. That's kind of what I was expecting, but the Porsche 944 Turbo did the lap in 2:36.011, blowing everything else out of the water. I mean, I thought the Datsun was fast, but this thing just handles so well, and it looks good, and honestly, I'm coming around a lot to the sound. Once I put on the exhaust mods and some things to change up the sound a bit, it really kind of fell into a good spot, so I'm loving the sound of it. Just to give some spoilers, this car is going to get some good scores, so without further ado, let's dive right into the Hoki score. Starting right off the bat with looks, I'm giving the 944 an 8.5. I'd love to give it a 9. I feel like it is a 9, but I have to dock that half a point because there's really nothing you can do to the looks of the car, and that's just a bummer for me. I wish there was a GT kit or something to do to this car. With sound, I'm giving it an 8. I wasn't thinking I was going to give it such a high score right off the bat, but again, once I put on some mods that kind of brought out that better sound, it really fell into a good spot. I love the sound of this. As far as customization goes, it gets a 4. I'm really happy to see those wheel spacing options, and there are some engine swaps, but there just really wasn't much to do to the body of the car, and there could have been more engine swaps or even a supercharger swap on the stock engine. Now for fun, I'm giving the 944 a 9. I'm a bit biased here because A-Class is already my favorite class to drive, but that just means I've driven a lot of other A-Class cars, and this is easily one of the favorites, if not my new favorite, for A-Class racing, so it deserves a 9. Now let's dive into the competitive scores. Starting with drag, there's not too much potential here. I'm giving it a 3, mostly just because it does have a good amount of power for a low-class car, so there's some potential there. But moving on to rally, I'm giving it a 7. This was actually a really good rally car. If you pick this up, try it out on some dirt roads. You'll probably be impressed. Moving on then to race, I'm giving it a 9. This car is not only really easy to drive once it's tuned in, it's really fast too, so not a perfect score, but about as close as you can get. Now, as for drift, the 944 gets another 7. This was a pretty dang good drift car. It was really easy to control, and although again there weren't many customization options, it still had the drift suspension, and I was able to kick it out pretty nicely. As far as online goes, I'm giving it a 6. There are a lot of other strong competitors in A-Class, cough cough bone shaker, so online racing is going to be a little bit tough with this car, especially considering its rear wheel drive, but I see some merit here for rivals racing, and honestly, go ahead and just bring this into some unranked free-for-all. It'll still be a fun and fast car, and I bet as long as you're a decent driver, you'll probably come out pretty close to on top, so that's why it gets the 6 for online. Now, the flexibility score is going to be a solid 6. Again, not much customization, but being good at both rally, race, and drift gave this the flexibility score that it did. Now, moving on to style points, again, between -5 and 5, the 944 gets a 4. This car is so sexy to me, and it totally embodies the style of that era, and it's got a bit of an oddball quality to it. If you pull up to a Forzathon Live in a car like this, I would appreciate it, so that's why it gets a 4. Now, let's go on to the total score, which is 71.5, our highest scoring car yet by a pretty good margin. And for a good reason. This is such a good car, and it's easily entering my favorites list. I definitely recommend that you guys give this one a try. You might find some struggles like I did with the tuning, so try downloading my tune on this one. I always host my tunes for the car reviews, and then go ahead and see if you can make your own, because there's more refining to be done with this car, and I think I'm going to actually spend some more time with it myself. So guys, that just about wraps it up for our car review on the Porsche 944 Turbo. Definitely pick this one up, guys, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.